Okay.
I'm gonna put you on mute because the kids are a little loud.
Okay. Beautiful. That's beautiful. You know what? We had a neighbor, and when we were younger growing up, he made some noise. His name was Mr. Funt. He was our downstairs neighbor. We were the upstairs neighbor. And he said he had a beautiful line. He said, the noise that we make from upstairs, it's music to his ears. That's what he said.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, we're on. If you want to mute, whatever you want, it's up to you, Ralph.
Yeah, well, I don't want to interrupt you, so I'll put it on mute.
Okay. Anytime you want to speak up, I'd love to hear your voice. Okay, we are on Nun Amabed 50b. Now, Mayu Kimptek Rabbi Yehuda. The art scroll is 50b1. We just established that the two brightot are like Rabbi Yehuda. If you recall, we had two brightos regarding putting some sand, rubbing sand into silver, where one brisa seemed to indicate you're not allowed to do that. One brisa was very, not seem more than seemed to, was very open, pointing at him that you can't go ahead and rub the silver with the sand. And the other brisa, there was an inference that you could rub silver with the sand. And the last thing the Gemara wanted to say was the two brightos, the two different opinions, is they're arguing in whether the rubbing of the sand in the silver will actually smooth out the silver, or does it have the possibility of smoothing out the silver? And the fact that it has a mere possibility of smoothing out the silver. Good morning, Asaf. Not only good morning, it's Chodesh Tov. It should be a great month for the community. So the fact that the question is there really a real possibility, a real concern you might smooth out the silver? Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that when you do an action on Shabbat, and this action might be an act of labor, but you're not sure if this action is going to be actually an act of labor or not. Like we gave the textbook example of dragging the bed outside in the field, during the bed in the outside of the dirt floor. You might make a groove, you might make a furrow, you might not make a furrow. If you make a furrow, that's the act of plowing. You're not intending to make a furrow, you might make a furrow. So we said Reb Shimon is more lenient. He says as long as you're not intending to make the furrow, it's not a definite you're making the furrow, you could actually drag the bed. And if you make the furrow, you didn't do anything wrong because there was no intention to do the act of labor, and there was no intention. It wasn't definite that was going to happen. Rabbi Yehuda says no, you can't do that. You can't drag the bed if it might make the furrow. So the question here is the rubbing of the sand against this silver utensil, is it going to smooth? Is there a concern? Is it this act might? Is it really a concern that you might smooth out the utensil? You might take some of the silver off and actually smooth out the utensil, or not? So that was what we just said. That was the argument of the two rabbis. That one rabbi says, you know what? There is a possibility that something might actually come off the silver. It might actually be smoothing. And the other rabbi says it's not it's not going to happen. Now you could ask the question: are they arguing whether it can happen or it can't happen? I presume we could say that everybody holds perhaps that it's possible that it could happen, but it's so maybe perhaps that they're arguing that it's so rare that it will happen. So maybe that's not really considered that should be an issue at all. Perhaps that's what they're arguing in. That's what the Gemara wanted to say until now. So we're on 50b1. The Gemara says, and we wanted to say that these Brightos are Rabbi Yehuda, because what was pushing our hand to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, because we had the Sefer that says that the Sefer of one of the Brightos, the Brighta that says you could the inference that you could use the sand, that it's not a problem, but it says you can't use it for your hair. And we understood the reason why you can't use it for your hair because on Shabbat is because maybe you might pull out some hair on Shabbat. And that's why you won't comb. Therefore, there's an issue of combing hair on Shabbat because it's maybe very probable that you're going to pull out hair by combing. Therefore, I think what we use is people use a soft brush on Shabbat instead of combing one's hair. Yes, Ralph.
Why would someone put sand in their hair? I don't understand that.
Right. Morning, Simon. So right. So what is this? Well, probably it would be a type of, maybe there's different types of sand that would actually be clean. Maybe would clean the hair of some sort. That's what I would. I mean, you think that sand will make it more dirty, right? Obviously, you don't want to get dirt in the hair, but that's going to lead to lice, right? But it could be the way. Let's see how they say over here.
Yeah, it's chocolate down there.
So it says over here, he may not rub his hair with them. So they didn't give me too much information. He says, yeah, so I'm not sure exactly which type of sand they're referring to, or something that maybe would be used as perhaps some sort of would clean out certain things. It's a good question exactly what the case is. Whatever that material is that they're using for their hair, the concern, if they rub it in their hair on Shabbat, it's gonna pull out the hairs. So Rabbi Yehuda is worried about that, and the Gemara says that idea that Rabbi Yehuda is worried about that, that's because he's afraid that the act of cutting hair might happen, right? That's what right? The fact that if you rub this material in your hair, you might pull out your hair. Hair is very easy to be removed, and you can't shear an animal on Shabbat. And therefore, if you go ahead and you rub your hair with that material, that would go ahead and possibly remove hair. And that's why you can't do that. Now, we say on Shabbat, we hold, so what we hold is, generally, we have to look up what the Sephardi halacha is. But the Ashkenazim hold on Shabbat, Ashkenazim interestingly hold that they don't use a comb on Shabbat for the hair. They go ahead and they use a special, like a soft brush on Shabbat. And the reason for that is, because I presume that the comb is so likely to take out the hair, and therefore we don't use a comb. I presume the Sfardim, you can look into the halacha as well, if they look into the halacha, but therefore that's the issue with the comb, because the likeliness of hair to come out. Even though you might be able to make a case to say that, maybe it doesn't, see, the question is, it's not definite that hair is going to come out when you use the comb, unless you say it's so common that hair comes out. Maybe I presume that's the reason why we don't use a comb. Let's see if anybody talks about that over here. but that's a practical halacha to look into. Okay, but that's something maybe if you remind me, Adam, give me a little homework. I'll try to look into that a little bit more because that's a very practical halacha, right? Once here on Shabbat, right, Simon? If we again that to use a special soft brush that's not so common that Ralph, if you want, if you want to mute it a little bit. You can mute it. You can mute it a little bit. If a soft brush, a soft brush that should not pull out hairs. Okay, so now the Gemara says, you said that the opinion is Rabbi 50b1. You said that the opinion, the brightest go according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ema Seifa. The Seifa says, of a pun of Yoda Viraglov. The Seifa says that you could go ahead and you could wash your face, your feet, and your hands with this sand material that will be a cleanser, some sort of cleanser material that you're using on Shabbat. It's, let's say, your Shabbat soap, so to speak, that you're able to use on Shabbat. Now, if the author of this Braita is Rabbi Yehuda, so how could you go ahead, if you're using on your face, you might have a little beard on your face, right? Very common that people have a beard on their face. So hama'aveseir. If you're afraid, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda is concerned that even when you do an act, when you don't know that you're going to be doing the act of labor, but it might happen, you're not allowed to do it. So how could you go ahead and use this cleansing on your beard on Shabbat and rub it or use it in your beard? You might come to, if you're going to rub it in your beard, there's a possibility that some hair might come out, and you'll be doing the act of gozes, of cutting hair on Shabbat. Now, we hold, let's say, like Reb Shimon, let's say we could hold like Reb Shimon, that you're not intending for hair to come out. It's not definite that hair's come out. Let's say it shouldn't be a problem. You should know, by the way, there is a letter in the Igrot Moshe, in the Tshuvot, the letters of Moshe Feinstein regarding the issue of washing one's beard on Shabbat. You have to look up that letter. But based on what our Gemara is saying, if the author of the Braita, it's the second thing I give two homeworks to me, the comb and the letter of Moshe Feinstein, right? So if the, I think it was letter was addressed to Rav Shraga Moshe Kalmanovich, the Mir Rosh Hashiva. So if the author of the Braita is Rabbi Yehuda, so then how does he allow you to use this cleansing material on your beard on Shabbat? Why isn't he would say you should not be able to use it because the hair might come out, right? So therefore it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. He can't be the author of the Braita. If you're allowed to use on your beard, that means it's Rabbi Shimon who says, since you're not intending to take out the hair, intending just to clean your face, it's not a problem. And even if hair does come out when you did the act, you weren't intending for the hair to come out. So it's not a problem. So therefore, he's the author. So how could you? So that's what the Gemara is saying. So you can't say that the author is Rabbi Yehuda. So then we'll be back to the drawing board. If then we have a stira, then how are we going to explain the two braitos, right? So let's see the Gemara again. B'maya kimta Rabbi Yehuda. You said that the author is Rabbi Yehuda, Ema Seifa. Of upon of the other Ragamut, you could use this agent to clean your hand, your feet, and your face on the Shabbat. Hamavaseir, but you're moving here, so therefore it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, who is the author of that Braita? The author of the Braita is Rabbi Shimon. So if it's Rabbi Shimon, so now then we're going to have back to our old question, right? What was the Gemara's original question? The Gemara first wanted to say the issue was regarding muksa, right? What was the issue? If you have something that's muksa that you're separated from, what do you need to do to the item to lose its status of muksa to become permitted to be used? So the Gemara said that if you take the dirt and you bring it into your house, just having in mind to use it as an absorbent, if you have any messes, if you have, let's say, children, and they make a spill, and you need that dirt to clean up the spill, the fact that you put it on the corner in your house, that's enough to have in mind to use it. Now it's no longer muksa. That's one opinion. That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. The Gemara said, but that seems to be against what we not that law doesn't seem to fit according to all opinions, because there was one opinion that said that's not enough. You have to actually do an action, like by the case of cutting the wood for firewood. If you want to make that wood no longer muksa, you have to actually tie the wood together to make it into it to use it for a chair, right? To do an action. So the Gemara suggested that, you know what? Even that rabbi who's more strict than the other rabbi and says you have to do an action, that's only when you're capable of doing an action. When there's something, an action to be done in the item. But by this dirt, there's no action that's really to be done that you could do in the dirt to show that it's really standing for permitted use, and therefore everybody would agree you're good by just having in the house ready to use as an absorbent. Then the Gemara challenged that opinion because we had the story of the sand, right? The Gemara brought using sand for giving a shine on silver, and the Gemara thought that one place indicated you could use sand on Shabbat to give a little shine, and one seemed to indicate you can't use the sand. And the Gemara says, what are they arguing in? So the Gemara thought they're arguing in whether bringing in the sand, having a mind to use it for a shine, to give a little nice, cleaner shine, does that remove it from the status of muksa by just having a mind to use it to shine a little bit, or that's not enough? And even though there's nothing to do in the sand to show that it's standing for permitted use, still there's an argument whether you can use the sand or not. So the Gemara wanted to show that it's that Rabbi Yehuda, the late rabbi's, the Amora's opinion, that something that there's nothing to do to show that it's no action that's able to be done in the item, and Rabbi Yehuda says it's not muksa anymore just by having a mind to use it for permitted use. I'll show you that's not true. It's not everybody agrees to that. It's not a universal opinion, because the story of the sand by the utensils, by the silver, seems to indicate there's one opinion that says you can't use the sand. Why not? So it sounds like the Gemara thought because it's muksa. So the Gemara says no, it has nothing to do with muksa. Right? That's what the Gemara wanted to say. The issue is, the Gemara says whether you're going to, it's not a muksa issue. Everybody holds it's not muksa. What's the issue? Maybe you might smoothen the silver. That's the issue over there. Right? That's what we want to say. And the Gemara first wanted to suggest that it's a disagreement between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. That when you do an action, and it might do the act of labor, you might smooth it out. So could you do an action of Shabbat where you might be doing an act of labor, but you're not intending to do an act of labor? Can you do such an action? The Gemara wanted to say that the opinion that says you could do such an action, that's Rabbi Shimon's opinion, and the opinion that says you can't do such an action is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that's more strict. Right? That's what the Gemara wanted to say. And then the Gemara said, and then with the morning, Josh. Chodesh Tov. Good morning, Nathan. Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov.
And then the Gemara said, okay, you want to say that the argument of the two brightos is depending on doing an act on Shabbat when you're not intending to do the act of labor, and the labor but it might happen. But since you're not intending, so one opinion says you could do that, and one bright is going like Rabbi Shimon that we're lenient, and one bright is going like Rabbi Yehuda, yet you can't do an act that you might do an act of labor. But the Gemara challenged that. Because the Gemara says, if the Braita that indicates that it's permitted to use the sand is like Reb Shimon, so the Gemara says, then why can't you use it on your hair? Because according to Reb Shimon, the same way you want to say that it goes like Reb Shimon that says it's permitted, but then if that's the case, so then you should be able to use it on your hair as well. Because Reb Shimon holds you're not afraid. Even if a hair might come out, but that's not a problem. You're not intending for the hair to come out, so you're not intending to do the act of labor of cutting hair on Shabbat. So then it should be permitted. So therefore, the fact that the Braita says that you can't use it for the hair. So therefore the Gemara wants to say, therefore it has to be that author of that Braita is Rabbi Yehuda. So if the author of the Braita is Rabbi Yehuda, so why does he allow you to use it for shining the silver? Because there should be a problem that it might smooth out the silver. So the Gemara said, what the Gemara said like this: when it comes to using it in the hair, it might take out a piece of hair, and therefore you can't do an act with the sand that might take out the hair. But that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Even when you don't intend to do an act of labor, but the act of labor might happen, you might be doing an act of work on Shabbat, you can't do it. But when it comes to the silver, nothing's happened. It's not going to smooth it out, right? And therefore that opinion holds that it's not going to smooth it out, and the other opinion says no. It's still a possibility. Maybe it will smooth it out, and therefore, so the opinion that allows you to use it on the silver is also is Rabbi Yehuda, but he will not allow you to do it in the hair. So the Gemara questioned that if that is Rabbi Yehuda, so then how could, and he allows you to use it you could goes ahead and use it for the silver, but he doesn't allow you to use it to rub it in the hair. But how does he allow you to use it on your face? You might come take out some hair. You might come take out some hair. You might take out the beard. You might take out some hair when you use it on your face. So therefore you have to say. So what's the Gemara's? Therefore it can't be Rabbi Yehuda. So if it can't be Rabbi Yehuda, so then who is that? Who is the author of that Braita? Because it's also doesn't seem to be in secret Rabbi Shimon. Because according to Rabbi Shimon, if it's Rabbi Shimon, then you should be able to use it on your hair also. Because Rabbi Shimon holds, if you're not intending to do the act of labor, and it's not definite the act of labor is happening, so you should be able to use this on your hair. So the Gemara says like this. You know what? Really, it's Rabbi Yehuda. And since it's Rabbi Yehuda, therefore you can't use it in your hair. Because it might come out, the hair might come out. And you could use it on the silver because it's not going to smooth the silver. So why are you allowed to go ahead and use it on your face? Maybe some hair is going to come out. So the Gemara says we're talking about a child. The child that doesn't have a beard. Iboyes ema b'katan. When we're talking about a child, so since we're talking about a child, therefore there's no concern that here that he has no beard, that the hair might come out. Iboyes ema b'isha. Or you could say we're talking about a woman, also doesn't have a beard. Therefore, there's no problem to use that material. We're talking about someone who's not capable of having children, and therefore that person, he doesn't have a beard. A lot of times, someone who is a saris, they don't have facial. Sometimes they don't grow a hair. That's a sign that they did that. That's a sign that there's something. What?
Question,
Is it-
why over here kind of specify who can use it on their face, kid, woman, and when they're talking about combing the hair, they don't specify. Woman has more hair than men.
Right.
When she will comb her hair, more likely
That it will come
she's
out.
gonna lose it
Right.
than men.
Right.
How come they didn't?
Right. So,
Spell it out over there.
right. So when it came to the hair of the head, the child, the woman, you couldn't use it. You want to be able to use it on the hair, right? Because it says you can't use it to rub it into your head, into your sa'aro, your hair. So and that would even apply to a child, because even if, meaning you can't go ahead. Let's say an adult would not be able to rub it into the child, or the woman can't rub it into herself. And even the child, you would train the child not to do it, because when he becomes an adult, you don't want him to do it. But because, like you said, Simon, because the hair might come out. But when it comes to but the face, where there's no when the lady doesn't have a beard, and the child doesn't have a beard, the saris doesn't have a beard, so therefore we go ahead and it's allowed to be done. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda. We spoke about using certain types of materials to wash the face. Amar Rav Yehuda, Afa levinta shari. Let's say you had, before Shabbat, you had a brick and you crushed the brick. You could use that dust that's that you create that was created before Shabbat. You can't crush a brick on Shabbat, right? Can't crush a brick on Shabbat. Can't grind, and you can't do such an act on Shabbat. But if you crushed it before Shabbat, so now you got a powder. So this powder you could go ahead and rub it into your, let's say it's a cleansing type of agent. You could go ahead and use it even if you had a beard. Now, what's the reason for this allowance? Because yes, we've been saying until now that there'll be an issue on the beard. That's only if you hold, that's only if you're of the opinion that we are concerned for an act that might take out a hair. Might this, but however, when according to Rav Shimon, if you do an act and you're not intending to take out the hair, you want to clean the beard, you're not intending to take out any hair, we're not. It's called dava she'emet chavein. It's an act that you're not intending to do, an act of labor, and the fact that it's not definite that the act of labor is going to happen, so therefore you're allowed to go ahead and do it. So therefore you should be able to use this, meaning this rabbi is a later rabbi, is Rav Yehuda. He lived generations after the old argument between the Tanoim of the early rabbis. Can you do an act that you might be doing an act of labor? The act of labor here is pulling out a hair, but you're not intending to pull out the hair, and it's not definite that the hair is going to come out. So Rav Yehuda says it's permitted. That it is permitted, and there's actually a letter which indicates the Shulchan Aruch takes that position, because since you're not intending to pull out the hair, let's take a look, and that's what the Meiri says, that this law follows Rabbi Shimon's opinion. I'll get out the Shulchan Aruch 1 second. So this becomes a very big leniency in the laws of Shabbat. that the halacha follows. When you do an act, you might do an act of labor, but you're not intending, and it's not definite. Um, that will not be a problem. Let's see. Shulchan Aruch Siman Shin Chavav Siftes. So let's take a look. Shin Chavav Siftes says the following. Probably we'll talk about the comb too. Let's see. Shin Chavav Siftes, where he says you could go ahead and wash your face and your hair and your hands and your feet, even your beard. Good morning, Nathan. And the Chafetz Chaim says that even if you want to wash your head on the Shabbat, as long as you don't squeeze your hair after you put the water in your hair, you don't squeeze. You got to be careful not to squeeze out the hair from the water.
You say you can do that.
He's not saying shower. He's saying at least pouring on your face, on your head.
Oh.
So he didn't say, okay. Okay, let's see.
Oh.
Um,
Yes.
Okay, let's continue in the Gemara. Yes, now, Omer Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, "Kuspa the yasmishari, the leftover stuff of the sesame after you press the sesame, you're allowed to go ahead and use that to wash the face." But again, because this is another type of material that will not, that it's not definite that it's going to remove hairs, and therefore you could go ahead and use it. They translate it as they say it's a sesame pulp. Sesame pulp, you could use it, and it should be the same reasoning because it's not definite that it's going to pull out any hairs. Amar Rava, alpha pulpuli, the dust of pilpuli. Pilpuli is take a crushed pepper, and you could go and also wash your beard with it. Amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet says, bardash, meaning there are certain things we're going to see that might be like hair removers. There are certain things that actually remove the hair, and therefore that, right? How do you pronounce that? Debilatories, yes. Many people, my father of blessed memory, used to use a depilatory many years ago before he used the shaver. Correct? That's what people would use to remove the hairs. They used to sell it it's a powder. They used to sell it in the drugstore, and it's a little before your time, Adam. And by the way, a lot of African Americans they used it because their hair was a little bit. Sometimes it's a little strong, harder to shave, and it was sold in the morning. It was sold in the drugstore. You bought it, and that you put it on your face. If you have to be careful not to leave it on too long because it could burn you a little bit. And you put it on, and then it would remove. And that was one of the ways people would want to keep a clean face, but they can't use a razor. So what does an Orthodox Jew use? So when the shavers weren't yet so common or so, and even shavers, not everybody accepted it. Right, but not everyone accepted shavers. Not everyone was, even the ones that had scissors motion, not everyone necessarily, not all the rabbis maybe were excited about it. So therefore, some people would just use a depilatory. And Moshe Fine says you can use a shaver, so, but not all rabbis were of that opinion. So therefore, that if you want to keep a clean face, which was a common look in America in the 1940s, 1930s, it was a clean face, and therefore, right? You mentioned ties and hats, that I was told that John F. Kennedy was the first president that didn't wear a hat at his inauguration, and as a result of that, the hat business went down. That's what I was told. How do you like that, Simon? Yeah. Changing styles. Yeah. So Amar Rav Sheshet, Barda Shari. Barda, you could use Barda also on your face. The Gemara says, what's Barda? So the Gemara is going to say it's a mixture of different of a certain type, an herb that's called the ohol herb, and there's a third of hadassah, of myrtle, third violet, that's mixed in, and therefore he says you could use that on your face. Rav Nechemia says, but it's all dependent if you have a majority of the ohel herb in it, that ohel herb will dominate it and make it a hair remover. Actually, will remove the hair definitely, and therefore you have to make sure you don't have more than 50% of that. He says, "My barda Rav Yosef tilta ahala, a third of ahala, a third of asa, a third of the myrtle leaves that are mixed in, that are grounded into this thing, and a third of violets." Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Rav
Ralph.
Yosef, like a rupa ola, as long as you don't have
You know
a
David?
majority of
No,
ola,
nice to meet you.
meaning it seems that the first
From Roswell.
opinion spoke about a third and a
Okay.
third and a
I'm sorry,
third.
from that be local?
This opinion
No,
says
but now
you can have more than a
Habsburg,
third
right?
of ola.
That's
Hold on, I
As long
got
as you don't have, majority of the
How
ola,
you did the thing
you're
yesterday.
good.
What was that?
Shabbat
Such
it's
a
not a
bummer because
problem.
you're
It's not a
leaving.
hair
Yeah.
remover.
So it's someone
Have
else's
a
good
good
luck.
Chodesh Tov,
What are
everybody.
you going to do?